You think you quit because it hurts.
You don't. You quit because it's boring. Pain is sharp. Pain is dramatic. Pain makes a story. Boredom is flat, and flatness feels unbearable. When you start something new, it's exciting. New routine, new goal, new discipline. Your mind is stimulated. You feel progress because everything is unfamiliar. But progress does not stay unfamiliar. It becomes repetitive. Repetition removes novelty, and without novelty, the brain searches for stimulation. This is where most people collapse, not at the peak of difficulty, not in extreme suffering, in monotony. The workout becomes routine, the study becomes predictable, the business becomes process, the relationship becomes ordinary, and the ordinary feels suffocating. You mistake that suffocation for a sign that it's wrong, a sign that it's not for you, a sign that something is missing. But nothing is missing. You are simply no longer entertained. Mastery is not exciting. It is repetitive. It is structured. It is boring. The beginning gives you dopamine. The middle demands discipline, and most people never survive the middle. They say they're burned out. They say they need something new. They say they've outgrown it. But what they've actually outgrown is stimulation. Boredom exposes your relationship with discomfort, because boredom is quiet discomfort. It doesn't scream. It lingers. It asks you to stay when nothing feels dramatic. Pain activates survival. Boredom activates restlessness. Restlessness searches for escape, and escape is easy. Scroll, switch, start something new, quit quietly. The brain prefers novelty over consistency. It prefers spikes over stability. It prefers excitement over repetition. But growth lives in repetition. Think about the strongest people you know, the most disciplined, the most consistent. Do you think their days are thrilling? No. They repeat. They show up. They execute. They endure monotony without collapsing. The world glorifies pain. It does not warn you about boredom. But boredom is the real filter. Pain can be endured for short bursts. Boredom must be endured for years. That is why most people stay average, not because they cannot handle suffering, because they cannot handle repetition. They need constant stimulation to stay engaged, and life does not provide that. The highway to anything meaningful is long, straight, unremarkable, day after day that looks the same. You start with energy, you continue with structure. If you rely on energy, you stop when it fades. If you build structure, you move when it's dull. This is the truth. You are not defeated by pain. You are defeated by monotony. And monotony does not look dangerous. It looks ordinary. So you underestimate it, until you find yourself starting over, again, and again, and again. Part of discipline is learning to sit in the uneventful, to work when it feels repetitive, to continue when nothing feels new. If you can survive boredom, you eliminate most of your competition, because most people quit the moment things stop feeling interesting. And that moment comes far earlier than they expect. Boredom is not neutral. It feels threatening, not because it hurts, because it removes stimulation, and your brain is addicted to stimulation. When something is new, dopamine rises. You feel engaged, alert, alive. When something becomes familiar, dopamine drops. The task doesn't change, your chemistry does. And when dopamine drops, the mind interprets it as loss. Loss of excitement, loss of progress, loss of meaning. But nothing has been lost, only novelty. The modern world has trained you poorly. Infinite scrolling, constant notifications, endless entertainment. Your baseline for stimulation is distorted. Repetition now feels intolerable. So when discipline becomes routine, it feels empty. You wake up, you train, you work, you repeat. No surge, no thrill, no dramatic shift, just process. And process feels flat. Flat feels pointless. Pointless feels like failure. This is misinterpretation. Flat does not mean ineffective. Flat means stable. The brain confuses intensity with progress. If it doesn't feel intense, it assumes nothing is happening. But intensity is not the measure. Consistency is. Most people require emotional spikes to continue. They need inspiration. They need urgency. They need crisis. Without that, they drift. Drift is quiet quitting. Not dramatic exit, just reduced effort. Lower standards, more distraction. Boredom creates a psychological vacuum, and the mind rushes to fill it. New goal, new routine, new identity. Because new feels alive. But new resets the cycle. You return to the exciting beginning, then face the same middle, then quit again. This is the pattern of average performance, chasing novelty, avoiding monotony, repeating the same arc endlessly. Understand this clearly. Boredom is the gatekeeper of depth. If you can sit in repetition without seeking stimulation, you move deeper. If you escape repetition, you stay shallow. Depth requires long stretches of sameness, the same drills, the same habits, the same conversations, the same systems. You think mastery is built on breakthroughs. It is built on maintenance. Maintenance is boring, but maintenance prevents collapse. The disciplined do not ask, "Is this exciting?" They ask, "Is this necessary?" That shift changes everything. Boredom only feels unbearable because you have trained yourself to flee it. If you stay, if you resist the urge to switch, something happens. The mind adapts. Restlessness fades. The repetition becomes rhythm, and rhythm becomes identity. The person who can operate without emotional stimulation is almost impossible to derail, because their effort does not depend on feeling, it depends on structure. Most people will never reach their potential, not because the work was too painful, because the work became too predictable, and they mistook predictability for stagnation. But predictability is where strength is forged, quietly, without applause, without spikes, without novelty, just repetition, and the willingness to remain when it's no longer exciting.
If you're done living in distraction,
Like and subscribe. This channel exists to help you protect your attention and build something real. Boredom does not make noise. It erodes. You don't wake up one day and quit. You reduce effort, slightly. You delay, slightly. You compromise, slightly. And each slightly feels harmless. You skip one session. You tell yourself it's minor. You scroll instead of study. You tell yourself you'll double tomorrow. You lower intensity just enough to feel relief. Relief becomes the reward. That is the collapse. Not dramatic, incremental. Pain forces decision. Boredom allows drift. And drift is harder to detect because you're still technically involved, still showing up, still trying. But the edge is gone. You stop pushing reps to the limit. You stop refining small details. You stop asking hard questions. Because refinement is repetitive. Repetition is dull. Momentum doesn't disappear instantly. It thins, like water slowly leaking from a crack. You don't notice until pressure is gone. The most dangerous quit is the slow one, the one masked as balance, the one disguised as I just need variety, the one framed as I've plateaued. Plateaus are not signals to leave, they are signals to stay longer. But staying longer requires tolerating sameness. Here is the cost of leaving too early. You never reach depth. You stay in surface competence, good but not exceptional, capable but not formidable. Every serious pursuit has a desert phase, long, flat, uncelebrated, where progress is microscopic and boredom whispers, "This isn't worth it." If you listen, you restart. If you restart, you return to the exciting beginning, and you repeat the same cycle forever. This is why many people look busy, but never become dangerous. They are constantly beginning, never enduring. The gym beginner is excited. The investor starting out is energized. The creator in month 1 is motivated. Month 12, routine. No applause, no visible leap, just repetition. The ones who endure month 12 change. The ones who leave return to month 1. Boredom convinces you that nothing is happening, but internally, structure is forming. Skill is stabilizing. Capacity is increasing. It just doesn't feel dramatic. You mistake feeling stagnant for being stagnant. They are not the same. Growth at depth is subtle, silent, gradual. When you quit from boredom, you interrupt compounding, and compounding only works for those who stay. The quiet collapse is this. You convince yourself that new equals progress, but new is just reset. Reset feels alive. Depth feels repetitive. If you constantly need excitement to continue, you will always remain in the early stages, because depth has no fireworks. Look at the road in front of you. Long, straight, unremarkable. Most turn around here, not because they are wounded, because they are tired of seeing the same horizon. And that is where separation happens. The few who stay in monotony begin to move beyond it. The many who flee monotony stay where they started. Boredom is the final filter. It decides who compounds and who restarts. If boredom is the filter, discipline is the response. Not intensity, not motivation, repetition. You do not conquer boredom by making things exciting. You conquer it by removing the need for excitement. When the work becomes dull, that is the signal. Not to switch, to settle, to deepen, to refine. The middle phase is where identity is forged. When no one is watching, when progress is invisible, when nothing feels new. This is where you decide what you are. Someone who requires stimulation, or someone who executes regardless. The disciplined person does not wake up asking, "Do I feel like it?" They ask, "Is it scheduled?" If it is scheduled, it is done. No negotiation. You must remove emotional voting from your effort. If your feelings get a vote, boredom wins. If structure decides, monotony becomes irrelevant. Structure is freedom, because it frees you from mood. Here is the shift. Stop chasing novelty. Start respecting repetition. The same drill, the same habit, the same standard, day after day. You will not feel dramatic growth. You will not feel constant excitement. You will feel steadiness, and steadiness compounds. The strongest people are not fueled by emotion. They are stabilized by systems. They trust routine more than inspiration. They trust schedule more than desire. If you can sit in monotony without searching for escape, you become rare. If you can repeat without emotional spikes, you become durable. Durability wins, not bursts, not surges. Durability. Pain tests your limits. Boredom tests your character. Pain demands courage. Boredom demands patience. Courage is visible. Patience is quiet. Most people can be brave for a moment. Few can be patient for years. That is why most quit from boredom, not pain. Pain ends quickly. Monotony stretches endlessly. But the one who accepts monotony eventually transcends it. The work becomes rhythm. The rhythm becomes identity. The identity becomes unshakable. You do not need fireworks. You need follow-through. You do not need intensity. You need endurance. Stay when it's dull. Stay when it's repetitive. Stay when it feels ordinary. That is where separation happens. If this sharpened your discipline, like the video. If you value endurance over excitement, subscribe. No hype, just repetition, and the strength built inside it. Most people misunderstand strength. They think it is shown through action, through force, through dominance, through reaction. But real strength often appears in restraint. Strength is revealed in what you refuse to do, the words you choose not to say, the anger you decide not to release, the impulse you allow to pass. Anyone can react. Reaction is easy. The insult arrives. You respond immediately. The frustration builds. You release it outward. The impulse appears. You obey it. This is not power, it is surrender. Because reaction means the moment controls you. When someone provokes you and you explode, they are not witnessing your strength. They are witnessing your lack of control. The Stoics understood this deeply. The man who cannot control his impulses is not strong. He is exposed. The strongest person in the room is often the quietest, not because they are passive, because they are deliberate. They choose their response instead of releasing it automatically. Restraint requires awareness. Awareness requires discipline, and discipline requires strength. It is easy to interrupt someone. It is harder to listen. It is easy to retaliate. It is harder to remain composed. It is easy to indulge desire. It is harder to refuse it. The world celebrates visible strength, but invisible strength is what sustains a person. Consider the moments where your character is tested, an insult in public, a disagreement that becomes personal, a surge of anger when something goes wrong. In those moments, you have two choices: release the impulse or contain it. Containment is strength, because containment requires control over yourself, and self-control is the foundation of all discipline. Without it, intelligence becomes manipulation. Without it, ambition becomes recklessness. Without it, confidence becomes arrogance. Restraint protects you from becoming ruled by your own impulses. When you learn to pause before reacting, you reclaim authority over your behavior. The strongest people are not those who overpower others. They are those who govern themselves. Because the hardest thing to control in the world is not an enemy. It is your own mind. Strength begins the moment you realize you do not have to act on every impulse. Most weakness is impulsive. It moves fast. It reacts instantly. It obeys emotion the moment it appears. Anger rises, words follow, frustration builds, action explodes, desire appears, indulgence follows. The sequence feels natural, but it is not discipline. It is reflex. Reflexive people believe they are being honest. They say, "I'm just being real." What they mean is, they have not learned control, because control requires delay. The pause between stimulus and response is where strength lives. Not in the reaction itself, but in the space before it. That space is invisible, and most people never train it. When irritation appears, they release it. When temptation appears, they follow it. When pressure appears, they panic. Each time, the impulse wins. But discipline expands that space. A fraction of a second becomes a moment. A moment becomes a decision. A decision becomes character. The person with restraint is not suppressing emotion. They are governing it. They still feel anger. They still feel frustration. They still feel desire. But feeling something does not require obeying it. This is where quiet authority begins. The ability to experience emotion without becoming controlled by it. When you master this, something changes. You become less predictable, less reactive, less easily provoked. And the world loses leverage over you. If someone can make you angry on command, they control your behavior. If someone can provoke you into impulsive action, they control your direction. Restraint removes that leverage. The calm person in the room is not passive. They are stable. And stability is intimidating, because it cannot be manipulated easily. The absence of reaction is often interpreted as weakness. In reality, it is containment. Contained strength, contained emotion, contained judgment. A person who does not need to prove their control already has it. Consider how often people speak when silence would serve them better. How often they escalate when patience would strengthen their position. How often they chase satisfaction when restraint would sharpen them. Each impulse is an invitation. Most accept immediately. Strength appears when you decline the invitation, when you refuse the argument, when you ignore the provocation, when you let the moment pass without acting on it. Not because you cannot respond, because you choose not to. And that choice reveals something powerful. You are no longer governed by impulse. You are governed by intention. If this message resonates with you, like and subscribe for more content like this. This channel is built for people who are done waiting.
Most people measure strength incorrectly.
They look for what someone does, the argument they win, the dominance they display, the reaction they unleash. But these things are loud, and loud things often hide instability. Real strength rarely announces itself. It reveals itself through restraint, through decisions no one sees, through actions that never happen, the message you never send, the argument you never enter, the anger you never release. These moments leave no evidence, which is why most people overlook them. But character is built in those invisible decisions, not in performance, in restraint. Consider how often the world invites you into reaction, provocation, disrespect, temptation. Each one asks the same question: will you obey the impulse? Most people answer immediately. They defend themselves instantly. They retaliate quickly. They justify their emotion as authenticity. But authenticity without discipline becomes chaos. The person who can hold their reaction holds their power, because the moment they refuse to react automatically, they regain control over the situation. Reaction gives the moment authority. Restraint takes it back. The strongest individuals develop a habit of non-reaction, not indifference, control. They see the insult, they understand the provocation, they feel the emotional surge, and then they choose silence, or patience, or distance. That decision changes everything, because power that does not need to prove itself feels immovable. A person who refuses to react impulsively cannot be easily destabilized. Their calm becomes structure, their restraint becomes gravity. This is why the Stoics placed such emphasis on governing the self. If you cannot control your impulses, you will always be controlled by circumstance. The world will push, people will provoke, situations will demand response. But response is not the same as reaction. Reaction is automatic. Response is chosen. And the difference between the two defines maturity. The quiet proof of strength appears in restraint, not the action you took, the action you refused. Over time, this discipline compounds. You become less reactive, less distracted, less emotionally hijacked by the moment. You become stable. And stability is rare, because most people are governed by impulse. Strength is not shown by dominating others, it is shown by mastering yourself, and mastery is proven through restraint. Strength matures through refusal. Not refusal of effort, refusal of impulse. There will always be invitations, arguments that pull you in, insults that demand retaliation, temptations that promise quick satisfaction. The world constantly tests your restraint, and every test asks the same question. Will you act because you choose to, or because the moment pushed you? When you begin to govern yourself, something changes. You stop reacting immediately. You pause. You observe. You decide. That pause is where discipline lives. Most people never build that space. Impulse moves faster than awareness. Emotion overrides intention. Reaction becomes habit. But the disciplined person strengthens the pause. They widen the space between feeling and action. And inside that space, freedom appears. Freedom is not doing whatever you feel. Freedom is not being controlled by what you feel. When anger rises and you remain composed, you are free. When temptation appears and you decline it, you are free. When provocation arrives and you remain silent, you are free. This freedom is quiet. It does not require an audience. It does not require recognition. It reveals itself through restraint, through decisions that no one else notices. You refuse the unnecessary argument. You refuse the indulgence that weakens you. You refuse the reaction that would damage your character. Each refusal sharpens your control. Over time, something powerful happens. Your impulses lose authority. Your emotions lose the ability to command your behavior. Your reactions become deliberate. You stop being ruled by the moment. And when the moment no longer controls you, neither do the people inside it. The strongest person in any room is rarely the loudest. It is the one who cannot be easily provoked, the one who cannot be manipulated through emotion, the one who chooses action deliberately. Strength is not always visible. Often, it appears in restraint, in silence, in the decision to do nothing when impulse demands something. That restraint is discipline, and discipline becomes character. If this clarified something for you, like the video, subscribe, then practice the discipline of refusal.
You don't fall apart in dramatic moments.
You erode. Low standards don't feel dangerous. They feel reasonable. They feel justified. They feel earned. I'm tired. I'll do it tomorrow. This is good enough. And nothing collapses immediately. That's why it's dangerous. When your standards drop, your identity adjusts to protect you. Not because you're weak, because the mind avoids conflict. It would rather lower the target than admit you're not hitting it. So instead of saying, I'm undisciplined, you say, I don't need that much. Instead of saying, I'm avoiding discomfort, you say, I value balance. You don't betray yourself loudly, you renegotiate, quietly. Standards define the version of you that is allowed to exist. If your standard for effort is low, the disciplined version of you has no authority. If your standard for honesty is flexible, the strong version of you dissolves. If your standard for who you tolerate is weak, your environment reshapes you. Standards are not preferences, they are borders. And when borders soften, invasion does not look like chaos. It looks like compromise. You tell yourself it's temporary. You tell yourself you'll raise them later. But here's the fracture. Every time you accept less from yourself, you are training your nervous system to tolerate less effort, less precision, less resistance, less pressure. And tolerance becomes identity. This is the hidden cost. Low standards don't just affect outcomes, they alter what feels normal. When you repeatedly allow yourself to underperform, your internal discomfort shrinks. The bar lowers. And what once would have embarrassed you now feels acceptable. The worst part? You don't feel it happening. There is no alarm, no dramatic loss, no public failure. Just subtle drift. And drift compounds. A slightly later wake-up time, a slightly softer workout, a slightly weaker boundary, a slightly easier excuse. Each one insignificant alone. Together, a different person. Low standards are rarely about laziness. They are about avoidance. Avoiding the discomfort of holding yourself accountable. Avoiding the friction of confronting your own inconsistency. Avoiding the pain of not measuring up to your own potential. So you adjust the ruler. And once the ruler shrinks, everything looks fine. You're still functioning, still moving, still surviving. But you are no longer sharpening. You are stabilizing at a lower level. And stabilization feels safe until years pass. The cost of low standards is not immediate failure. It is long-term mediocrity. Quiet, respectable, unquestioned. And the most dangerous part? You can live an entire life like that. Never collapsing, never rising.
You adapt faster than you think.
Not upward, downward. The mind is efficient. It does not argue with reality for long. It reorganizes around it. If you repeatedly act below your potential, your brain stops expecting more. It recalibrates. What once felt uncomfortable becomes tolerable. What once felt embarrassing becomes ordinary. What once felt beneath you becomes your baseline. This is how low standards become identity, not through collapse, through repetition. You skip one difficult task, nothing breaks. You compromise once in a conversation, no explosion. You let something slide that you know you shouldn't. The world keeps turning. And your nervous system records something subtle. This level is safe. Safety is powerful. The body prefers it. It will always choose predictability over pressure. So, if you repeatedly reward yourself for avoiding discomfort, your system begins to associate avoidance with relief. Relief becomes reinforcement. Reinforcement becomes habit. Habit becomes character. And character becomes destiny. Low standards are not maintained consciously, they are maintained biologically. When you lower effort, you reduce stress. When you reduce stress, you feel immediate comfort. The mind marks that comfort as success. But the cost is delayed. Discipline feels tense in the moment. Avoidance feels relaxed. So the body votes for relaxation, again and again. Eventually, tension itself feels abnormal. Holding yourself accountable feels harsh. Demanding more from yourself feels extreme. And now something dangerous has happened. High standards begin to look unreasonable. You start labeling discipline as obsession. You call precision too much. You describe consistency as rigid. This is normalization. You no longer compare yourself to who you could be. You compare yourself to who you were yesterday. And if yesterday was weak, today feels acceptable. The comparison window shrinks. Ambition narrows. Vision shortens. Low standards are not loud. They are subtle permissions. Just this once. It's not a big deal. It doesn't really matter. Each phrase sounds harmless, but each one shifts the line. Over time, you stop noticing the shift. You believe you are stable, balanced, realistic. But realism without standards is surrender. The tragedy is not that you fail, it's that you stop demanding excellence from yourself. And when you stop demanding it, you stop recognizing it. Your tolerance for mediocrity expands. Your appetite for pressure shrinks. Your resilience softens. The hidden mechanism is simple. You become what you repeatedly permit. Not what you intend. Not what you claim. Not what you once believed. What you permit. Low standards are permission structures, and once those structures are built, your behavior aligns with them automatically. There is no dramatic fall, no external alarm, just a slow recalibration of what feels acceptable. And once acceptable shifts downward, rising again requires pain. More pain than maintaining strength ever would have required. That is the trap. You lower standards to avoid discomfort, but you accumulate a deeper discomfort later, the discomfort of knowing you settled. And most people never confront that. They simply adapt, again and again.
If this message resonates with you,
Like and subscribe for more content like this. This channel is built for people who want control over their focus, not constant noise. There comes a moment you cannot ignore. Not dramatic, not explosive, just quiet recognition. You see someone operating at a higher standard, and something inside you tightens. Not envy, not hatred, recognition. You recognize the gap, the distance between what you tolerate and what is possible. That distance is the fracture. Low standards protect you from immediate discomfort, but they expose you to long-term regret. And regret is heavier because it lingers. You begin to feel a subtle dissatisfaction, not with the world, with yourself. You cannot fully respect the version of you that consistently chooses the easier option. And self-respect, once weakened, changes everything. Confidence does not come from affirmation, it comes from evidence. Evidence that you hold your own line. Evidence that you keep your word to yourself. Evidence that you demand precision when no one is watching. When that evidence disappears, confidence erodes quietly. You still function, you still move through life, but something internal feels hollow. That hollow feeling is not lack of talent, it is lack of standard. Low standards fracture identity, because identity is built on repeated self-confirmation. I do hard things. I don't compromise. I maintain my word. Remove those confirmations long enough, and the identity dissolves. Now something dangerous begins. You start defending your lower level. You rationalize it. You criticize higher standards in others. You downplay excellence to protect your comfort. This is where erosion becomes corruption. When you cannot meet a higher standard, you attempt to lower the standard itself. You call ambition unhealthy. You call discipline extreme. You call effort unnecessary. Not because it is, but because it exposes you. Exposure hurts more than effort. The fracture deepens when you look back. Years pass. Opportunities drift. Potential narrows. Not because you lacked ability, but because you consistently permitted less. Low standards do not ruin you overnight. They redirect you, slightly, consistently, and direction over time becomes destination. You wake up one day in a life that feels smaller than it could have been, stable, manageable, predictable, but smaller. The cost is not public failure, it is private awareness. The quiet knowledge that you could have demanded more from yourself and didn't. That knowledge does not scream, it sits. It follows you in moments of silence. It appears when you see discipline in someone else. It resurfaces when you imagine what you once intended to build. And it asks a simple question. Why did you settle? Low standards fracture the relationship you have with yourself, because deep down, you know when you are capable of more. And when you repeatedly choose less, trust erodes. Without trust in yourself, discipline feels impossible. Without discipline, growth stalls. Without growth, time becomes heavier. This is the darker edge. You don't just lose progress, you lose belief. And rebuilding belief requires confronting the standard you abandoned. That confrontation is uncomfortable, which is why most avoid it and continue drifting. Quietly.
Raising your standards
Is not dramatic. It is private. You do not announce it, you do not perform it, you do not negotiate it, you decide. Low standards were built through permission. Higher standards are built the same way, through non-negotiation. You stop asking how you feel, you ask what is required. You stop adjusting the ruler, you adjust your behavior. Discipline is not intensity, it is consistency under discomfort. You begin with small lines. Wake up when you said you would. Finish what you started. Speak precisely. Train even when motivation is absent. These actions are not impressive, but they are structural. Every time you hold the line, you generate evidence. Evidence that you are capable of self-command. Evidence that your word means something. And evidence rebuilds identity. The cost of low standards was drift. The benefit of high standards is direction. Direction restores tension. Tension restores strength. Strength restores respect. You will feel resistance. The nervous system will protest. It prefers the old baseline. That protest is not a signal to retreat. It is proof you are rising above what became normal. Raising standards means choosing short-term discomfort over long-term regret, choosing effort over explanation, choosing structure over softness. It is not about perfection. It is about refusing to tolerate what weakens you. You do not need external validation. You need internal alignment. When your actions match your potential, confidence stabilizes. Not loud, not flashy, stable. That stability cannot be taken from you because it was built privately. The restoration begins when you stop asking what you can get away with and start asking what you are capable of. High standards do not make life easier, they make you stronger, and strength simplifies decisions because the line is clear. The hidden cost of low standards was a smaller life. The reward of higher standards is a truer one. No applause required, no audience needed, just alignment. If this clarified something for you, like the video, subscribe, then raise the line, quietly. Authority does not explain itself. Not because it cannot, because it does not need to. The moment someone begins constantly explaining their decisions, their authority begins to shrink. They justify the rule. They defend the boundary. They negotiate the decision. And every explanation quietly sends the same signal. This position is open for debate. Authority does not operate through debate. It operates through clarity. Most people misunderstand this. They believe explanation equals fairness. They believe justification equals leadership. They believe the more you explain, the more legitimate you appear. But explanation often creates the opposite effect. When every decision is defended, people begin to question it. When every rule is justified, people begin to test it. When every boundary is explained, people begin to negotiate it. And negotiation weakens structure. Authority understands something simple. Not every decision requires approval. Some decisions simply stand. A leader decides the direction. A parent sets the boundary. A disciplined person draws the line. The moment that line requires endless justification, it stops being a line. It becomes a suggestion. Authority is not loud. It does not argue for its position. It occupies it. The person who truly holds authority rarely feels the need to defend every action, because their position is not built on persuasion. It is built on stability. People sense this stability. They recognize it instinctively. Consider how often insecurity reveals itself through explanation. Someone makes a decision, then immediately begins defending it, clarifying it, softening it, apologizing for it. Each word weakens the decision because the explanation implies doubt. Authority rarely carries doubt into the room. It carries certainty. This certainty does not require aggression. It does not require intimidation. It requires composure. A calm decision spoken once often carries more authority than 10 defensive explanations. Because calm signals stability, and stability signals control. People trust what appears grounded, not what appears defensive. Authority never rushes to explain itself, because true authority is not trying to convince anyone, it is establishing direction. And direction does not ask for permission, it simply moves forward.
Over-explaining is rarely about clarity.
It is about reassurance. When someone repeatedly explains their position, they are often trying to secure agreement, approval, acceptance. But authority is not built on agreement, it is built on structure. The moment your decisions depend on universal approval, your authority becomes conditional. And conditional authority is fragile. People begin to sense the hesitation. They hear it in the extra words. They notice it in the defensive tone. You say the decision, then you explain it, then you soften it, then you justify it. By the time the explanation finishes, the decision no longer feels firm. The problem is not explanation itself. Explanation can be useful, but constant explanation signals uncertainty. Authority speaks clearly, once. It does not repeat itself endlessly to gain validation. Consider how easily people test a position that sounds negotiable. If a rule is followed by long explanations, someone will try to challenge it. If a boundary is justified repeatedly, someone will try to push it. Because explanation suggests flexibility. Flexibility has its place, but authority requires limits. Without limits, structure collapses into suggestion. The strongest leaders understand this balance. They do not explain every decision. They explain when clarity is necessary. And they remain silent when explanation would weaken the position. Silence can carry more authority than justification, because silence implies certainty. The decision stands, whether or not it is applauded. People instinctively recognize this stability. They feel when a line cannot be easily moved. And when people sense that a boundary is firm, they stop trying to negotiate it. Over-explaining invites pressure. It opens space for argument. It signals that the position may still change. Authority closes that space. It does not rush to defend itself. It does not scramble to justify its presence. It states the direction. Then it holds it. Because the moment you begin defending your authority excessively, you are no longer exercising it. You are asking for permission to keep it.
If you're done living in distraction,
Like and subscribe. This channel exists to help you protect your attention and build something real.
authority collapses long before people realize it.
Not through rebellion, through negotiation. It begins the moment authority starts explaining itself too often. A rule is set, then explained, then softened, then defended again. At first, the structure still appears intact, but something subtle has shifted. The rule no longer feels absolute, it feels negotiable. And once something feels negotiable, people begin to test it. This is where erosion begins, not through confrontation, through curiosity. Someone asks why the rule exists. Someone else questions whether it is necessary. Another person proposes an exception. And because the rule was already explained once, it must now be explained again. Explanation multiplies pressure. Each justification creates another opening, another question, another challenge, another attempt to move the line. This process is rarely aggressive, it is gradual. People lean against the boundary, then lean again, then lean harder, until the boundary moves. And the moment it moves, authority loses gravity. Gravity is what makes authority stable. It is the sense that certain decisions are fixed, certain boundaries are immovable, certain lines do not shift with pressure. Once gravity disappears, structure becomes fragile. People no longer adapt to authority. Authority begins adapting to people. This reversal changes everything. When authority adapts constantly, it becomes reactive. When it becomes reactive, it becomes predictable. When it becomes predictable, it becomes controllable. And controllable authority is not authority. It is management under pressure. The most powerful forms of authority avoid this trap entirely. They do not rush to justify themselves. They do not defend every boundary. They do not negotiate every decision. Instead, they allow structure to stand, calmly, consistently. When someone asks why the boundary exists, the answer is simple: because it does. Not because it cannot be explained, because it does not require explanation to remain valid. This quiet certainty stabilizes the structure. People sense when a rule will not move. They recognize when a decision is final. They feel when a line is not open to debate. Once that recognition appears, testing stops. Pressure fades. Questions diminish. Authority regains gravity. And gravity changes behavior. When people sense stability, they adjust themselves instead of trying to adjust the structure. This is the difference between authority that survives and authority that slowly dissolves. One constantly explains itself. The other simply stands. Authority does not need to raise its voice. It does not chase approval. It does not rush to defend every decision. Because true authority understands something simple. The more you explain yourself unnecessarily, the more you invite challenge. Not every decision requires persuasion. Not every boundary requires debate. Not every direction requires agreement. Authority is not built through endless justification. It is built through consistency. People learn the strength of authority through repetition. A decision is made, the decision holds. Pressure appears, the decision still holds. Over time, something subtle happens. People stop testing it. Not because they were forced, because they recognize stability. Stability creates gravity. Gravity shapes behavior. When people sense that a boundary will not move, they adjust themselves instead of trying to move the boundary. That is the quiet power of authority. Authority does not negotiate its existence. It occupies its position. It does not rush to justify every rule, because rules constantly defended begin to feel uncertain, and uncertainty weakens structure. The strongest leaders understand this instinctively. They speak clearly. They decide calmly. They repeat themselves rarely. Their authority comes from composure, not performance. A calm statement delivered once often carries more power than 10 explanations spoken defensively, because calm signals certainty, and certainty stabilizes direction. This does not mean authority ignores reason. It means authority chooses when explanation is necessary, not when it is demanded. The moment authority begins explaining itself to every challenge, it begins surrendering its weight. Real authority carries weight quietly. It does not chase validation. It does not argue for its existence. It simply stands. And over time, that stillness becomes influence. Because people trust what does not move easily, they respect what does not react emotionally. They follow what appears stable. Authority never explains itself constantly, because authority does not need to prove it exists. It is already present. If this sharpens something for you, like the video, subscribe, then practice speaking less and standing firmer. Calm people make others uneasy. Not because they are aggressive, because they are unreadable. Most people communicate through reaction, facial shifts, tone changes, immediate responses. Emotion is their language. When someone removes visible emotion, the language disappears. You are used to reading tension. You are used to reading excitement. You are used to reading insecurity. But calm gives you nothing obvious. And when you receive no signal, your mind starts searching. Are they judging me? Are they upset? Are they unimpressed? Are they hiding something? Your imagination fills the silence. Calm disrupts prediction. Humans are wired to predict behavior. Prediction creates safety. When you cannot predict someone, you experience uncertainty. Uncertainty creates tension. A reactive person is easy to read. Push them, they flare. Challenge them, they defend. Praise them, they light up. Their pattern is visible. A calm person does not flare, does not rush to defend, does not spike with praise. Their responses are measured. That measured space feels like distance. But distance is not coldness, it is control. When someone does not mirror your emotional intensity, you lose leverage. You cannot escalate them. You cannot destabilize them easily. You cannot hook them with provocation. That is unsettling. People often mistake emotional neutrality for secrecy, but neutrality is often discipline. It means the internal state is not easily pulled by external noise. Notice how quickly rooms shift around the calm person. Voices lower, energy stabilizes, or tension rises because others project meaning onto the silence. Projection fills gaps. If you cannot read someone, you assume. Assumption replaces clarity. This is why calm feels powerful. It withholds emotional data, and emotional data is what most people rely on. Think about confrontation. One person raises their voice, the other remains steady. Who appears stronger? Not the louder one, the controlled one. Calm compresses energy. It does not leak it. And energy that does not leak is hard to measure. Most people expose themselves through micro-reactions, a flicker of irritation, a subtle insecurity, a defensive tone. These are tells. Calm removes the tells. When the surface does not ripple, depth is assumed, and depth commands respect. But understand something important. Calm is not silence. Calm is regulated response. It is not absence, it is precision. Precision means words are chosen carefully. Reactions are delayed intentionally. Emotion is processed before expression. That delay creates opacity. Opacity creates intrigue. Intrigue creates psychological weight. And psychological weight shifts dynamics. The reason calm people are hard to read is because they are not reacting in real time. They are observing in real time and responding on their own terms. When you do not give immediate access to your internal state, you cannot be easily steered. and what cannot be easily steered is difficult to manipulate. That is the beginning, not mystery, control.
You read people through emotion.
You always have. Raised eyebrow, shift in posture, change in tone. Your brain scans constantly. It looks for cues to determine safety, approval, threat, status. Emotional expression is social currency. It tells you where you stand. If someone smiles, you relax. If someone frowns, you adjust. If someone reacts strongly, you recalibrate. Emotion is feedback. Remove the feedback, the system destabilizes. When someone remains composed under pressure, your prediction model fails. You cannot categorize them easily. You cannot determine if you're winning. You cannot determine if you're affecting them. That uncertainty creates psychological friction. Most interactions are subtle power exchanges, not aggressive, but present. You say something, you wait for reaction. The reaction confirms your influence. If there is no visible reaction, you question your influence. And people do not like questioning their influence. Calm people deny emotional validation. They do not reward provocation. They do not punish disagreement with intensity. They do not inflate praise. Without visible feedback, others must rely on logic instead of emotion. And logic is slower, more deliberate, less stimulating. This is why calm can feel intimidating, not because it is aggressive, because it is self-contained. Self-containment removes dependency. Most people leak internal state through micro-expressions. Annoyance flashes, excitement spikes, ego surfaces. These leaks make them readable. Readability creates comfort. Comfort creates predictability. Predictability creates control. Calm interrupts that chain. When someone does not leak emotion, you cannot map them quickly. Your mind fills the silence with speculation. Are they unimpressed? Are they calculating? Are they judging? Projection begins, and projection reveals more about the observer than the calm person. The calm individual often says little, but watches closely. Observation gathers information. Reaction gives it away. This is the hidden advantage. When you are calm, you receive more than you reveal. You watch patterns, inconsistencies, subtle insecurity. You collect data while others expose themselves. It is not mystical, it is structural. When you do not chase emotional exchange, you conserve clarity. Clarity makes you slower to anger, slower to defend, slower to commit to emotion. That slowness reads as depth. And depth unsettles those who operate on impulse, because impulse is fast. Depth is patient. People who depend on emotional cues struggle around those who do not provide them. It feels like speaking into still water. No ripples, no distortion, just reflection. But reflection forces self-awareness, and self-awareness is uncomfortable. That is why calm people are hard to read. They are not signaling their internal state for approval. They are not broadcasting insecurity. They are not reacting to be understood. They are stable, and stability does not beg to be interpreted. It simply exists.
If this message resonates with you,
Like and subscribe for more content like this. This channel is built for people who want control over their focus, not constant noise. Not all calm is strength. Some of it is concealment. There is composure, and there is suppression. They look identical from the outside. Inside, they are not the same. Composure processes emotion. Suppression buries it. Composure regulates reaction. Suppression postpones it. The calm person who has mastered themselves feels stable. The calm person who avoids themselves feels distant. There is a difference. Suppressed emotion does not disappear. It hardens. It leaks in tone, in subtle withdrawal, in cold detachment. Some people are hard to read because they are disciplined. Others are hard to read because they are guarded. Guarded is not powerful. Guarded is defensive. When someone remains calm, but never clarifies, never engages, never expresses necessary truth, that is not depth. That is avoidance. True calm can speak when needed. It does not hide behind silence. It does not disappear during tension. It remains present. There is another distortion. Calm used as manipulation. Emotional neutrality used to intimidate, to create imbalance, to make others feel unstable. This is not composure. This is strategy without integrity. If your calm is designed to make others uncertain, you are not regulated. You are calculating. The difference lies in intention. Are you steady, or are you trying to control perception? Real composure is not concerned with being unreadable. It is concerned with being unshaken. Unreadability may be a byproduct, but it is not the goal. If someone cannot read you because you are centered, that is strength. If someone cannot read you because you refuse to engage, that is detachment. And detachment over time isolates. Many confuse emotional minimalism with maturity. Speaking less does not equal depth. Showing less emotion does not equal control. Control is measured by stability under pressure, not by emotional absence. You can be calm and clear, calm and direct, calm and expressive. Stillness does not eliminate communication. It refines it. If your calm prevents necessary conversation, it is a shield. If your calm allows clear conversation without escalation, it is mastery. Suppression builds internal pressure. Regulation releases it intelligently. One fractures quietly, the other strengthens quietly. Ask yourself, are you hard to read because you are disciplined or because you are closed? Discipline stabilizes emotion. Closure hides it, and hidden emotion always resurfaces, eventually. The hardest people to read are not empty. They are composed. But composition requires awareness. Without awareness, calm becomes distance, and distance erodes trust. True steadiness does not isolate. It anchors. It does not confuse. It clarifies without noise. Calm without clarity is opacity. Calm with clarity is authority, and authority does not need to hide. The goal is not to be unreadable. The goal is to be unshaken. Unreadability is a byproduct. Stability is the foundation. When you are emotionally reactive, others can steer you with praise, with insult, with pressure. Reaction gives away leverage. Calm keeps it. But true calm is not silence for effect. It is emotional regulation in real time. It is the ability to feel without displaying chaos. You do not suppress anger, you observe it. You do not deny anxiety, you stabilize it. You do not eliminate emotion, you govern it. Governance is different from absence. A calm person still feels, they simply do not broadcast. This is why they are hard to read. Not because they are empty, because they are selective. Selective expression creates control. Unfiltered expression creates exposure. You do not owe immediate access to your internal state. You owe clarity when clarity is required. There is a difference. The disciplined mind asks, "Does this reaction serve me?" If the answer is no, it stays quiet. If the answer is yes, it speaks, without escalation. That balance creates authority, not loud authority, steady authority. When you master this, something shifts. You stop being pulled into emotional storms. You stop escalating small provocations. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You become stable, and stability is rare. Rare things are respected. The calm person is not mysterious because they are hiding. They are steady because they are centered. Centering takes discipline. It requires awareness of your impulses, control of your tone, patience in your responses. It requires comfort in silence, comfort in pause, comfort in not reacting. When you are comfortable in those spaces, others feel it. They sense composure. They sense grounded presence. And grounded presence cannot be easily disturbed. That is the difference. Calm as defense creates distance. Calm as discipline creates gravity. Gravity does not chase attention. It attracts it. If you want to be harder to read, stop reacting impulsively. If you want to be respected, stop leaking emotion under pressure. Control your response. Control your timing. Control your tone. And you control your presence. If this sharpened your awareness, like the video. If you value control over chaos, subscribe. No noise, just steadiness, and the strength that comes from governing yourself. Ease feels harmless. It feels earned. It feels intelligent. It feels efficient. Why struggle if you don't have to? Why endure friction when comfort is available? So you remove resistance. You automate difficulty away. You choose convenience. You avoid tension. And nothing breaks. That is the deception. Fragility does not appear during comfort. It appears when pressure returns. The body adapts to stimulus. If you lift weight, it grows stronger. If you expose it to cold, it adjusts. If you practice discomfort, tolerance increases. But if you remove all friction, it adapts to softness. And softness becomes your baseline. Ease is not neutral. It is conditioning. When you avoid hard conversations, your tolerance for confrontation shrinks. When you avoid physical strain, your capacity for endurance drops. When you avoid intellectual challenge, your clarity dulls. The absence of difficulty is not rest, it is regression. The mind, like the body, requires resistance to stay sharp. Without it, reflexes slow. Decisions hesitate. Confidence weakens. Ease trains you to expect stability, to expect smoothness, to expect predictability. But life does not guarantee any of that. The more you design your life around comfort, the less prepared you are for disruption. And disruption is inevitable. You may not notice the shift immediately. You still function, you still move, you still appear composed. But under pressure, cracks appear. A small obstacle feels overwhelming. A minor setback feels catastrophic. A single confrontation feels threatening. Not because the obstacle is large, because your tolerance has shrunk. Ease does not make you peaceful. It makes you sensitive. The nervous system becomes reactive when it is underexposed to stress. Small discomforts register as threats. Minor friction feels unbearable. And you begin structuring your life to avoid disturbance entirely. That is fragility. Strength is not built in comfort. It is built in controlled adversity. Without adversity, strength fades. Ease feels like safety, but safety without resilience is illusion. The ice looks solid until weight shifts.
Your threshold is adjustable.
Not fixed, not permanent, adjustable. The nervous system recalibrates to whatever it repeatedly experiences. High stress, managed properly, expands capacity. No stress at all shrinks it. When you remove friction from your life, your tolerance for friction declines. Quietly. The body is efficient. It discards what it doesn't use. Muscle fades without resistance. Mental sharpness dulls without challenge. Emotional resilience weakens without pressure. Ease teaches your system that strain is abnormal. So when strain inevitably arrives, you interpret it as danger. A delayed result feels unbearable. Criticism feels personal. Uncertainty feels threatening. Not because they are catastrophic, because your exposure has been limited. Resilience is built through repeated, controlled exposure to difficulty. Without exposure, the stress response becomes exaggerated. Minor discomfort triggers disproportionate reaction. This is how fragility forms, not through trauma, through underexposure. You design a life free of inconvenience, everything optimized, everything smooth, everything predictable. And your nervous system forgets how to operate in chaos. The shrinking threshold is dangerous because it is invisible. You still believe you are strong. You still believe you are capable. Until something disrupts the pattern. A financial hit, a betrayal, a loss, a failure. What should be processed as challenge feels like collapse. Not because the event is fatal, because you are underconditioned. Ease also distorts perception. When everything in your environment is comfortable, even small discomfort appears magnified. Silence feels heavy, effort feels extreme, pressure feels unfair. You begin to resent resistance itself, and once you resent resistance, you avoid it even more. Avoidance accelerates fragility. Fragility increases sensitivity. Sensitivity demands more avoidance. The loop tightens. Strength is not built in the absence of stress, it is built in its management. Without manageable stress, your system forgets how to regulate. And regulation is what separates strength from collapse. The ice does not crack because it is weak by nature. It cracks because it was never reinforced. Ease feels like protection, but it removes the very pressures that keep you resilient. And when real pressure arrives, there is no structural memory of how to endure it. Only shock, only overwhelm, only reaction. That is how ease makes you fragile. If you're serious about building this mindset, follow and subscribe. Everything here is about discipline, focus, and real progress. Fragility stays hidden until it is tested. You can live comfortably for years, optimized routines, minimal friction, controlled environments. And then something shifts. Pressure does not announce itself, it arrives. A loss, a confrontation, a sudden instability. And the system that was built around ease begins to tremble. Because it was never trained to hold weight, you begin to notice the signs. Your reaction is sharper than the event. Your stress is heavier than the problem. Your avoidance stronger than your action. Small disruptions create outsized responses, not weakness of character, underexposure. You thought comfort meant stability, but comfort removed the stress that builds stability. When pressure rises, you feel overwhelmed. When uncertainty appears, you panic. When difficulty demands endurance, you search for escape. This is the fracture. Fragility does not mean you break easily, it means you react disproportionately. The mind without adversity becomes impatient. The body without strain becomes brittle. The identity without resistance becomes conditional. Conditional strength collapses when conditions change. Ease convinces you that life should remain smooth. So when it isn't, you interpret disruption as injustice. You feel attacked by reality itself. But reality was never obligated to be soft. Fragility also exposes itself in decisions. You hesitate more. You delay action. You seek reassurance before moving. You want guarantees, and life offers none. The stronger you become, the less you need certainty. The more fragile you are, the more certainty you demand. Ease increases dependency on comfort, on predictability, on controlled outcomes. When those disappear, identity shakes. You question yourself. You doubt your capacity. You feel smaller than the situation. Not because you are incapable, because you were unconditioned. Pressure does not create weakness. It reveals it. And revelation is uncomfortable. You see how little resistance you've been carrying, how little discomfort you've tolerated, how quickly you seek relief. That awareness stings, but it is necessary, because until fragility is exposed, it cannot be strengthened. Ease hid the cracks. Pressure illuminates them. And once illuminated, you have a choice. Retreat further into softness or rebuild under strain. Fragility is not permanent. It is conditioning, and conditioning can be reversed. You do not rebuild strength by waiting for life to harden you. You introduce controlled hardship yourself, deliberately. Cold exposure, difficult conversations, intellectual strain, physical effort, silence without distraction. Not for punishment, for expansion. The nervous system adapts to what it repeatedly faces, so face discomfort in small, repeatable doses. Do not overwhelm yourself, but do not protect yourself from every edge. Ease shrank your threshold. Intentional difficulty expands it. Wake earlier than required. Finish what you start. Hold eye contact when it would be easier to look away. Sit with uncertainty instead of numbing it. These are small acts, but they rebuild structural memory. Resilience is memory. Memory of endured pressure. Memory of survived discomfort. Memory of acting despite hesitation. When that memory accumulates, fragility fades. Pressure begins to feel familiar instead of threatening. Uncertainty becomes tolerable instead of paralyzing. Resistance becomes sharpening instead of suffocating. Do not eliminate ease entirely. Rest is necessary, but rest must follow strain, not replace it. Without strain, rest becomes decay. With strain, rest becomes recovery. You do not need chaos to become strong. You need friction. Consistent, voluntary friction. When you stop designing your life around comfort, you stop fearing discomfort. And when you stop fearing discomfort, you become stable. Ease made you fragile. Discomfort will make you capable. If this sharpens something for you, like the video, subscribe. Then step into resistance. Quietly,